In Ibadan, on a sunny afternoon, the family gathered for lunch at Efosa's elder brother's house. The table was full of food, laughter and chatter, but for Efosa, the air always felt heavy. He was the quiet one, the one people often overlooked. While others shared stories of success, travels and wealth, Efosa kept his words few, choosing silence over noise. But that silence often made him an easy target. As everyone settled in, his brother's wife suddenly turned her sharp gaze toward him. Her voice cut through the room louder than the clinking plates. She laughed and said, "Look at you, jobless and poor. You can't even afford decent shoes." Her words stung like a knife. Everyone at the table burst into laughter, some trying to hide their smiles, but the mockery was clear. The sound echoed in Efosa's heart like thunder. He glanced down at his shoes. Old, worn out, the leather faded with time. He had worn them for years because buying new ones was never his priority. Life had pushed him into sacrifices most of them would never understand. Still, the way she said it, with such pride and cruelty, made him feel stripped of dignity. He lowered his head, not because he agreed with her insult, but because the weight of shame pressed him down. He tried to swallow his pain, but it rose like fire in his chest. His brother, the man he once loved and sacrificed for, did not defend him. Instead, he laughed along with the others, shaking his head like it was all just harmless fun. But to Efosa, it wasn't a joke. It was humiliation, served in front of the very family he once gave everything to protect. He clenched his fists under the table, hiding them on his lap. Tears burned at the corners of his eyes, but he forced them back. A voice inside him whispered, "Endure it. One day they will see." He wanted to scream, to remind them of everything he had done, every sacrifice they had forgotten, but instead he chose silence. That silence carried his dignity, even as the room laughed at his expense. Deep inside, a fire had been lit. Efosa said nothing, but his heart made a promise. This insult would not break him. One day, it would be the reason they bowed their heads in shame while he stood tall. That night, after everyone had laughed at him, Efosa walked back to his small room with a heavy heart. Sleep would not come. He lay on his bed staring at the ceiling, and memories of his past came rushing back like waves that refused to stop. He thought of his late father, a man who always carried wisdom in simple words. His father used to look at him and say, "The quiet ones carry the heaviest load." At the time, Efosa never fully understood what that meant. Now those words felt like a mirror of his life. He remembered being a teenager, full of dreams. He had always loved books, always dreamed of finishing school and becoming someone great. But when hard times came and money became scarce, his father had to make a difficult choice. Only one child could continue schooling. His elder brother had a chance to go abroad, but the family couldn't afford both. Without anyone asking, Efosa quietly stepped back. He told his father, "Let him go. I'll manage somehow." His father looked at him with heavy eyes, almost as if he could see the sacrifice burning inside his youngest son. That day changed everything. Efosa stopped schooling so his brother could study in another country. He watched him leave with bags of hope, while he stayed behind, working small jobs to support the family. Nobody asked how he felt. Nobody noticed the dreams he buried inside his chest. The family praised the brother's future, but forgot the cost. It was Efosa's future that had been given up, yet he wore a smile and carried on. Now, years later, the very brother he gave up his own education for sat at the lunch table and laughed at him. And the brother's wife, the woman who never knew the story, never knew the nights Efosa went hungry so his brother could eat well, mocked him like he was nothing. That pain was heavier than any insult. It was betrayal, sharp and cruel. Efosa closed his eyes as the memories pressed harder. He remembered his father's last days. The old man had pulled him aside and whispered, "Son, I see what you carry. The world may not clap for you now, but one day, your silence will speak louder than all their laughter." At that time, Efosa had simply nodded, unsure if those words would ever come true. Tonight, sitting alone in his small room, he felt those words alive in his heart. He thought of the books he never got to finish, the dreams that were never given a chance. Yet, he also felt the strength that came from his quiet endurance. He had carried the heaviest load, and though no one saw it, he knew his father did. With tears on his face but fire in his heart, Ephosa whispered to the night, "I am not done. My story is not over." He had been mocked, but the memory of his sacrifice gave him a reason to rise again. And this time he would rise higher than anyone expected. The family gathered again, this time in Benin City, for a cousin's celebration. The house was filled with music, children running around, and the smell of jollof rice in the air. Everyone dressed their best, flashing gold jewelry and new clothes. Ephosa came quietly, wearing his same old shoes and simple shirt. He never liked to draw attention, but somehow his silence always made him stand out. As people ate and laughed, Nkechi's sharp voice rose above the noise once again. She looked at Ephosa and smirked, her words dripping with poison. "Ah, see our family beggar," she said loudly, making sure everyone heard. "Always sitting quietly, waiting for scraps. Do you even have anything to your name?" Her laughter followed like a slap in the face. The room froze for a moment, then burst into laughter. Some cousins shook their heads awkwardly, others joined in, but no one stopped her. Ephosa's elder brother, the one he had sacrificed his dreams for, was sitting right there. For a brief second, Ephosa hoped his brother would finally defend him, stop the humiliation, say something kind. But instead, his brother chuckled, nodding like it was true. The betrayal cut deeper than the insult. Ephosa felt his chest tighten. Tears filled his eyes, and he quickly looked away so no one would see. He clenched his jaw, trying not to break in front of them. His heart screamed with pain. Was this the reward for everything he had given up? Was this what his sacrifice had come to, mockery and shame? His father's words echoed in his mind. The quiet ones carry the heaviest load. He had carried it all, poverty, loneliness, lost dreams. Yet here he was, treated like a burden. In that moment, sitting in that noisy room filled with laughter at his expense, Ephosa felt something shift inside him. He did not shout. He did not curse. He did not fight back. Instead, he lowered his head, and in the middle of all the noise, he whispered softly to himself, "One day they will know my worth." It wasn't a wish. It was a promise. Behind his wet eyes, a fire was born. The insults no longer only hurt, they fueled him. The more they mocked, the stronger his silent vow became. He realized that the day he had been waiting for, the day his father spoke of, was closer than they knew. The party went on, laughter filling the air, but Ephosa was no longer listening. He sat quietly, staring into the distance, his mind already painting a different future. A future where their laughter would stop, and their mocking voices would fall silent. That night in Benin City, the insult was sharper than ever, but it did more than wound him. It became the boiling point. Ephosa's pain turned into power, and deep within, he knew the world would soon see him differently. They would regret every laugh, every word, every insult. And when that day came, he would not need to shout. His success would speak for him. A week passed after the painful gathering in Benin City. Ephosa went about his quiet routine, working small jobs here and there, trying to push away the sting of the insults. But no matter how hard he tried, Nkechi's words echoed in his ears. "Family beggar." Each time he remembered his brother laughing along, his heart broke a little more. He wondered if life would ever give him a chance to breathe, a chance to prove he was more than what they saw. Then one morning his old phone rang. The number on the screen was strange. For a moment he thought it was a mistake, but something inside told him to pick it up. "Good morning, am I speaking with Mr. Ephosa?" a deep, professional voice asked. "Yes, this is Ephosa," he answered cautiously. "This is Mr. Okonkwo, the branch manager of Unity Bank in Lagos. We need you to come in urgently regarding your late father's estate. Please, it is very important." Ephosa froze. "My father's estate," he repeated slowly, his voice trembling. "But I don't understand. Why me?" The manager's tone was calm but firm. "Sir, I cannot discuss the details over the phone, but you must come to Lagos as soon as possible. Please bring a valid ID. We will explain everything when you arrive." When the call ended, Ephosa sat on his small wooden chair in disbelief. His father had died years ago, and as far as he knew, everything had been left in his elder brother's hands. Why was a prestigious bank calling him of all people? The confusion made his hands shake. He looked around his modest room, the cracked walls, the thin mattress, the shoes that had carried him through humiliation after humiliation. He whispered to himself, "Why now? Why me?" His heart was racing. Part of him was scared it was a mistake. Another part of him felt something was about to change forever. That night, Efosa packed a small bag. He had nothing fancy to take, just 2 shirts, his worn shoes, and the hope that the trip would bring answers. As he folded his clothes, his father's voice returned in his memory. "The world may not clap for you now, but one day your silence will speak." Those words felt heavier than ever. Early the next morning, he boarded a bus to Lagos. The ride was long, dusty, and crowded, but Efosa barely noticed. His mind was racing the entire journey. What could the bank want with him? Why did the manager's voice sound so serious? Could it be something his father had kept hidden? With every mile closer to Lagos, Efosa's heart pounded harder. He didn't know what awaited him, but deep inside, a quiet whisper told him this journey would change his life. Whatever awaited him at that bank, it was no ordinary matter. It was destiny knocking on his door. When Efosa finally reached Lagos, his body was tired from the long, bumpy ride, but his mind was restless. He barely slept the night before, replaying the bank manager's words again and again. As he walked into the tall glass building, he felt small. The place looked too fine, too polished, for someone like him with worn-out shoes and a simple shirt. People in suits moved around with confidence, but Efosa's steps were slow and unsure. Still, he knew he had to find out why he was called. At the reception desk, he cleared his throat and said softly, "Good morning, Efosa. The manager asked me to come." The lady looked up, gave a polite smile, and quickly called someone. Moments later, a tall man in a dark suit appeared. He stretched out his hand warmly. "Mr. Efosa, I'm Mr. Okonkwo, the branch manager. Please come with me." Efosa followed him into a quiet office. The air smelled of leather chairs and expensive polish. His heart pounded as he sat down. The manager opened a brown file and looked at him carefully before speaking. "Mr. Efosa, I know this may come as a surprise, but your late father left some instructions with us before he passed. He set aside an estate under your name, accounts, properties, and investments that only you could access once the time was right." Efosa blinked, confused. "Under my name," he whispered. "But my brother, he was the one everyone said." The manager shook his head gently and slid the documents across the table. "No, sir. It was you. Your father admired your sacrifices, the way you gave up your own chance so your brother could study abroad. He wrote in his will that the one who carried the heaviest load deserved the greatest reward. He wanted you to have this." Efosa's hands trembled as he touched the papers. His eyes scanned the figures, the long list of properties, and the numbers his mind could hardly believe. Millions, land, heirs, houses, all tied to his name. It felt unreal, like a dream too big for him to hold. Tears blurred his vision. He remembered all the times he had gone hungry so his brother could eat, all the insults he had endured, all the nights he had prayed quietly, asking God if anyone saw his pain. And now here was the answer. His father had seen. His father had not forgotten. The manager's voice broke through his thoughts. "Mr. Efosa, from this moment, your life will never be the same. You are no longer the poor man they mocked. You are the rightful heir to your father's hidden legacy." Efosa wiped his tears with the back of his hand. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Papa, you believed in me all along." In that moment everything changed. The shame, the laughter, the insults. None of it mattered anymore. The man they once called the family beggar was now holding the key to a future brighter than he ever imagined. His silence had spoken at last. Efosa walked out of the bank with the documents clutched tightly in his hands, but his steps were slow. The busy streets of Lagos seemed louder, the cars rushing past, the voices blending into chaos, but inside him there was only silence. His life had just changed in a way he never imagined, yet he didn't feel the urge to shout or rush home to prove everyone wrong. Instead he felt calm, almost peaceful. He whispered to himself, "Not yet. Let them think I'm still the same. My time will come." For days he stayed in Lagos, learning and listening. The bank manager connected him with trusted financial advisors. He sat quietly in meetings, nodding, asking careful questions. He didn't want to waste the gift his father had left him. He opened new accounts, started small investments, and bought shares in companies he had only heard of on the radio before. Every step he took was measured, thoughtful. He knew money could disappear quickly if not handled wisely, and he refused to let that happen. At night, alone in his small rented room, he spread the papers across his bed. The lists of properties, the numbers written in black ink, they all seemed unreal. He touched them again and again, just to be sure it wasn't a dream. Sometimes tears rolled down his cheeks as he remembered all the times he had been mocked for wearing the same shoes, eating the cheapest food, and sitting silently while others called him useless. Now, quietly, he was building a future that would silence them all. Back in Ibadan, nobody suspected anything. When his brother's wife sneered at him over the phone, asking if he had found small change to buy new shoes, he simply smiled and said nothing. When relatives looked at him with pity during family calls, he kept his voice calm, never hinting at the storm of blessings waiting to unfold. His silence became his shield, and his planning became his weapon. Weeks turned into months. Behind the scenes, Ifosa bought land in strategic places. He started a poultry business under another name, one that quickly grew. He invested in transportation and even helped sponsor a small tech startup. He walked into meetings looking plain and ordinary, yet people soon realized he had the mind of a sharp businessman. His quietness, once mocked, became his greatest strength. It kept others blind to his growing power. Each night as he lay down, he remembered Nkechi's voice calling him, the family beggar. He would close his eyes and smile softly. "Let them laugh," he told himself. "When the time comes, their laughter will die in their throats." Ifosa was no longer the poor man they ridiculed. He was no longer the forgotten one in the corner. He was a man preparing, step by step, for the day the truth would be revealed. The storm was coming, and when it arrived, it would shake the entire family. The house in Ibadan was buzzing with noise that evening. The family had gathered for a big dinner, the kind where laughter filled the air and plates of food were passed around. Ifosa came quietly as he always did, wearing the same old shoes and a plain shirt. To the others he looked no different, still the quiet one, still the man they thought had nothing. Nobody knew the storm that was waiting just outside their door. As the meal went on, people told stories, clinked glasses, and celebrated small victories. Ifosa sat at the end of the table, listening more than speaking, but Nkechi's sharp tongue couldn't resist. She leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing at him, and said with a sneer, "Ifosa, tell us, when will you stop being a burden to this family? Or is this your destiny, to live off others forever?" The room erupted with laughter once again. Some tried to hide it, but their smirks betrayed them. Ifosa lowered his eyes, letting their mockery bounce off him. Inside he was calm because he knew something they did not. His silence was no longer weakness. It was power waiting for the right moment. Just then, the sound of footsteps echoed from the doorway. The laughter slowly faded as a tall man in a fine suit stepped into the room. His presence alone commanded respect. He held a thick envelope in his hands, and his eyes searched the room until they landed on Ifosa. "Good evening," the man said firmly. "I am Mr. Okonkwo, manager of Unity Bank in Lagos. I believe I have urgent business with Mr. Ifosa." The room went silent. Forks stopped midair. Chairs shifted uneasily. All eyes turned toward Ifosa, the man they had just mocked. Nkechi's smile froze on her face, her words caught in her throat. Mr. Okonkwo walked closer, placing the envelope on the table directly in front of Ifosa. "Sir," he said respectfully, "these are the final documents for your inheritance. As per your late father's wishes, everything has now been processed in your name. You are required to sign here to complete the transfer." Gasps filled the room. The thick envelope looked heavy, filled with papers that carried weight far beyond ink. The family stared in shock, their minds spinning, trying to understand what they had just heard. Efosa lifted his eyes slowly, his calm gaze moving across the table. He saw the disbelief on their faces, the color draining from his brother's cheeks, the sudden trembling in Nkechi's hands. He did not smile, he did not boast. He simply nodded and reached for the envelope, his movements steady, almost graceful. In that moment the roles had reversed. The man they had laughed at, insulted, and mocked as a beggar was the only one who truly carried wealth. And the silence in the room was louder than all the laughter they had ever thrown at him. The storm had arrived, and it had struck with full force. The room was frozen in silence, broken only by the sound of the bank manager's calm voice. He placed the thick envelope on the table and opened it carefully. With respect in his tone he said, "Mr. Efosa, these are the documents for your inheritance. Please sign here." The words fell like thunder. For a moment no one moved. The laughter that had filled the room earlier now seemed like a memory too far away. Eyes widened, mouths dropped open, and the smell of food on the table suddenly felt distant compared to the weight of those papers. Nkechi's face turned pale. Just minutes ago, her tongue had been sharp with mockery, but now not a word could escape her lips. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped her glass, trying to hide her shock. The same man she had called a burden was now revealed as the heir to something far greater than she or her husband ever owned. Efosa's elder brother sat stiff, staring at the documents as if his world had just collapsed. His fork slipped from his hand and clattered against the plate, but he didn't notice. His eyes were locked on the envelope, on the signature line where Efosa's name waited. He looked at his younger brother, the one he had laughed at, and for the first time in years, he had no words. The other family members whispered in disbelief. "Did we hear right? Inheritance? Efosa?" The shock spread across the room like fire. No one could hide their astonishment. The man they had dismissed as worthless, the man they had called the family beggar, was suddenly the richest person in the room. Efosa sat quietly, his face calm. His hands rested on the table, steady, unlike the chaos around him. Slowly, he picked up the pen the manager had placed beside the documents. As he leaned forward, the sound of the pen scratching across the paper was like music, each stroke silencing years of insults, each letter burying the laughter that once cut him. When he finished signing, he leaned back, his eyes scanning the table. He didn't need to speak. The silence was enough. He saw the disbelief in his brother's eyes, the fear in Nkechi's face, the shame spreading through the family. For the first time they were the quiet ones, and he was the one in power. The bank manager closed the file, nodded respectfully to Efosa, and said, "Congratulations, sir. Everything is now legally yours." With that, he stood and left, leaving the family to sit in stunned silence. Efosa did not gloat, did not boast, did not even smile. He simply sat there, his dignity intact, his silence louder than any words he could have spoken. The man they ridiculed had risen, and the truth lay bare on the table for everyone to see. Their laughter was gone forever, shattered by the power of those papers. The room stayed heavy with silence after the bank manager left. Nobody touched their food anymore. The smell of pepper soup and fried fish still lingered, but the taste of the evening had turned bitter. All eyes were on Efosa, the same man who had been mocked moments ago. Now he sat at the head of power, his inheritance sealed, his dignity shining brighter than any jewel on the table. Nkechi, desperate to break the silence, forced a shaky laugh. Her voice trembled as she said, "Ah, Efosa, come on now. We were only joking. You know we love you. Your family." But her smile did not reach her eyes. Everyone could see the fear and embarrassment behind her mask. Efosa looked at her slowly, his eyes calm yet sharp like a quiet storm. His voice was steady without anger, but each word carried weight. "Love doesn't mock. Respect doesn't laugh at scars. If you truly loved me, you would never have used my pain as your entertainment." The words cut deeper than any insult ever could. Nkechi's face crumbled. She lowered her gaze, unable to meet his eyes. The entire table went silent again, the weight of his truth pressing on everyone's chest. His elder brother shifted in his chair, clearly torn between shame and desperation. 4 years, he had carried himself like the favored one, the man of success. But now he looked small, smaller than ever. Slowly, he reached across the table, stretching out his hand toward Ephosa. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Brother, forgive me. I didn't know. I should have defended you. I should have stood by you." For a moment, it seemed like Ephosa might take his hand. The room held its breath, waiting for reconciliation. But then, quietly, Ephosa pulled his hand back. His silence was louder than rejection. The message was clear. Forgiveness would not come so easily. Nkechi fidgeted with her necklace, her pride shattered. The cousins who once laughed now kept their heads low, ashamed of the part they played in mocking him. The power had shifted completely, and everyone felt it. The man they had called the family beggar was now the one who held the torch of truth and wealth in his hands. Ephosa leaned back in his chair, his expression calm. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't boast, he didn't need to. The silence around him was enough. It burned more than any shouting could. It made each person in that room face their guilt without escape. For years they had made him feel small. Tonight, he didn't need to make them feel the same. The truth had already done it for him. And as they sat in shame, Ephosa's quiet dignity filled the room, turning their laughter into ashes. The tables had truly turned, and this time they would never forget. The night was bright at Victoria Island, Lagos. Ephosa's new estate sparkled with lights. Music filled the air, and guests walked around in awe of the beauty of the mansion he now owned. But this celebration was not for show. It was for the people who had stood by him when he had nothing. His true friends, old neighbors, and quiet supporters filled the hall with joy, their laughter genuine, their smiles real. Ephosa walked to the center of the stage, dressed in a simple but elegant suit. The crowd grew quiet, waiting for his words. He took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the faces before him. These were not the people who mocked him, not the ones who laughed at his worn-out shoes. These were the people who believed in him when the world called him worthless. He raised his voice, calm but firm, and said, "Wealth is not in the noise you make, but in the quiet truth you carry. They mocked me when I was silent, but it was in that silence that my strength grew. Today I stand not because of what I lost, but because of what I carried inside." Applause erupted, echoing across the estate. People clapped, cheered, and even wiped tears from their eyes. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment as his words spread like fire across social media. Far away in the crowd, Nkechi and her husband stood quietly in a corner, their heads lowered. The same man they once humiliated now stood taller than ever, celebrated by many, admired by all. They were not part of his triumph, they were only shadows in the light of his victory. Ephosa smiled softly. His silence had spoken, and the world had finally listened.